Well, Ken Brown is the finance editor and Hong Kong bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal. We spoke about the Malaysian government's recent crackdown and plans by the Attorney General to potentially introduce new laws that would see people who leak information about the scandal imprisoned.
Yeah, it's been a dramatic move by them. I mean, the government has been tightening restrictions on speech and threatening people who come out against the government for some time now, and this was the most extreme action. And I think it's no surprise that it came after the attempt by the government to say, you know, this money that went to the Prime Minister's bank account came from Saudi Arabia. And the reality is no one really believes that, and so they've gotten a big backlash on that. And so then they come out and say now everyone can't speak about it.
Not only can't anyone speak about it, they're also threatening journalists who report on it, that they too can be imprisoned.
Right. So, you know, last year they shut down a couple of news organizations that had been reporting on the scandal. And so this is part of that, right? They really are trying to limit discussion of this because the more that comes out, the worse it looks for the government.
What they can't limit, though, are those ongoing investigations. We're seeing one in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in the US, in Switzerland. Now, those investigations are going to obviously continue the headlines for them.
Well, you know, it was pretty stunning, right? You come out and you say, you're the Attorney General, you come out and say the Prime Minister did not steal this money. It was a gift, a donation from the Saudis, right? And then just a few days later, the Swiss investigators come out and say, oh, well, $4 billion was stolen from 1MDB. I mean, it's shocking. When has a Swiss investigator ever come out and said something like that?
Yes, very dramatic indeed, as you say. Then there's this court case that has started in Singapore involving a private banker, Yak Yu Chi. Who are they really going after, though? Who are the big fish these investigations might be after?
Well, we don't know. I mean, there's a million moving parts here. You know, the Swiss are interested in this because Swiss private banks were used to move some of this money. And these are big, you know, $500 million chunks of money, which is unusual for some of these relatively small private banks. So that could be interesting. And of course, if you look at where the money moved and who it came from and who it went to, that'll tell you a lot about the story. But all these investigators have little bits and pieces of the investigation, so you don't know what's going to come out. The interesting thing will be if they start to work together, and there's some evidence that they are starting to do that, and then you really get a broader picture of what's been happening.
Do you think, Ken, it's going to lead back to the Prime Minister's office, despite their attempts to say that he had nothing to do with this and that he's been innocent?
Well, our reporting has shown for months now that the money did not come from the Saudis, but it came via a bunch of companies and bank accounts related to 1MDB. And, you know, our story hasn't been called into question yet, and we have lots of evidence to back that up. So as the investigators dig deeper into this, it's been a real peel the onion type of story. You get little bits and more stuff comes out every week or every month or whatever. I think, you know, it'll be hard to keep it away from the Prime Minister.
And of course, as you mentioned earlier, the Attorney General cleared the Prime Minister very publicly. He's also told the Anti-Corruption Agency to stop investigations domestically. Do you think Najib Razak will survive this?
You know, I don't know. I mean, he's gotten out so far, right? You know, he's a pretty powerful guy in a pretty powerful position. I mean, you know, so we don't know. I think the issue for the party, so does he keep his job, and then does he get investigated and somehow get involved in the criminal justice system? And I don't know that. I think in the party there's been some frustration because, you know, these guys who want to stay in office, and you know, it's pretty hard to imagine he gets reelected in a couple of years. So I think, you know, the party could rise up, and there's been, you know, talk about that, but it still hasn't happened. He's retained his control on power. It's impossible to say what's going to happen in the Malaysian criminal justice system, although, again, he has a pretty strong lock on that. And then who knows what happens in the rest of the world.
There's, of course, been a lot of opposition to the very draconian laws that Najib Razak has introduced. There have been protests. They seem to be petering out a little. Do you think they will just die away?
We don't really know. I mean, the frustration with the Prime Minister and with this scandal has continued. There haven't been protests, but, you know, you do man-on-the-street interviews, and there's this rising frustration. And, you know, the economy is struggling, and the currency is struggling, and it's a tough time for this country anyway. So, you know, there's got to be frustration on the ground. I think the real action for the next few months is going to be these overseas investigations. And I think if they find really serious stuff, it's going to be very hard for the Malaysians to ignore it.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye on it. Thanks so much for joining us, Ken.
Thank you.